The story of humanity is written in many languages. Stones and bones, temples and tombs, art and artifact, all speak of a past that is at once tangible and tantalizingly incomplete. Yet, beneath the surface of our history, beyond what can be measured in ruins or deciphered from texts, lies a question that shakes the foundations of what we know about ourselves. Could our very DNA, the microscopic strands that define who we are, carry within it the memory of civilizations long vanished? Imagine standing at the edge of a vast canyon at sunset, the golden light stretching over ancient terraces carved by hands we will never know. You feel the weight of centuries pressing down, and in that moment, you wonder, are these echoes of human achievement merely dust and memory, or are they encoded in the very cells that make up our bodies? Science tells us that DNA stores information, genetic instructions that dictate eye color, immunity, and predispositions. But can it also store the whispers of human experience, the faint imprint of lives that once shaped entire societies? Modern genetics, with its towering labs and sleek sequencers, has revealed that life is a coded text written in 4 letters, repeated across the millennia. Each gene is a sentence, each chromosome a chapter. And yet, when scientists peer into this microscopic library, they find only fragments, traces, and patterns. The skeptic will argue, memory belongs to the brain, to synapses firing in the quiet moments of thought and reflection. DNA is biological, not historical. It is chemical, not narrative. Memory, knowledge, culture, these are ephemeral mental constructs, not molecular inscriptions. But consider this. Nature often defies the boundaries of human expectation. Studies in plants and animals reveal that experiences, even traumatic ones, can leave marks across generations. Mice trained to fear a particular scent pass that anxiety to their offspring. Plants exposed to environmental stress adjust, and their progeny inherit that resilience. If such epigenetic memory exists in simpler forms of life, why should humanity be an exception? Could the molecules of our bodies, the very blueprint of our being, act as an archive, carrying information not just about survival, but about civilization itself? As we ask this question, the mind begins to wander across time and space. Picture the ruins of Göbekli Tepe in present-day Turkey, where carved stones suggest a sophistication far earlier than conventional history allows. Imagine the sprawling streets of Mohenjo-Daro, perfectly laid out, their precision hinting at knowledge now lost. Envision the pyramids of Egypt, monuments of stone that align with stars and solstices, pointing to a comprehension of the cosmos that challenges everything we think we know about ancient humans. The evidence of ingenuity is all around us, yet vast gaps remain. What if these gaps, the lost knowledge, the vanished philosophies, the forgotten rituals, are not gone entirely, but encoded deep within our biology, awaiting discovery? The tension here is cinematic in itself. On one hand, we have the observable, the ruins, the artifacts, the DNA sequences. On the other, the speculative, the possibility that the blueprint of life carries echoes of human thought and civilization. It is a dance between doubt and belief, between the measurable and the imaginable. To explore this possibility, we must embrace both perspectives, letting science guide us while imagination illuminates the shadows. Only then can we begin to ask, if memory can reside in molecules, what might it remember? Wars waged and civilizations lost? Technologies forgotten and wisdom erased? Or perhaps something more subtle, a resonance of human creativity, a pulse of experience that whispers across generations. Even the language of genetics itself hints at poetry. A single strand of DNA coils into a double helix, a spiraling staircase reminiscent of ancient ziggurats, a pattern repeated endlessly across time and space. Each twist, each nucleotide is both ordinary and miraculous, a chemical instruction that builds the machinery of life it also holds the potential for hidden stories. The notion that this code could contain more than mere biological function feels audacious. Yet the audacity is precisely what draws us forward. Science progresses by challenging assumptions, by peering into the unknown and asking questions that border on the impossible. Consider the human mind, conditioned to seek patterns, to tell stories, to find meaning in chaos. Could it be that our curiosity, our relentless urge to explore, is itself a reflection of inherited memory and culture, not only in culture but in our very selves? Some philosophers and theorists propose that consciousness is not confined to the brain alone, but interacts with deeper layers of reality, layers that might intersect with the molecular history of our species. Here, the narrative begins to weave. Science, philosophy, and imagination converge. The ruins speak, the DNA whispers, and the cosmos looks on in silent witness. And yet, caution tempers wonder. The scientific method demands rigor. The idea that DNA carries the memory of civilizations is extraordinary, and extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Critics warn of overreach, of conflating metaphor with mechanism, of reading stories into sequences that encode only proteins and regulatory instructions. Yet history teaches us that revolutionary ideas often begin at the edge of belief, where skepticism and curiosity collide. Without questioning, without daring to imagine the seemingly impossible, some truths might remain forever hidden in this exploration. We are both detectives and dreamers. We trace the strands of DNA as one might trace the lines on an ancient map. We examine bones and ruins, interweaving them with molecular evidence. We follow clues from epigenetics, archaeology, and comparative anthropology, always aware of the boundary between observation and speculation. The narrative is cinematic because life itself is cinematic, a story that stretches across time, space, and consciousness, where the past is not simply behind us, but potentially within us. By the end of this journey, we are left with more questions than answers. That is the nature of mystery, the engine of intellectual awe. Could our genes be more than survival manuals? Could they be repositories of experience, encoding not only the triumphs and failures of individual lives, but perhaps the echoes of entire civilizations? The possibility shakes our understanding of history, biology, and identity. It challenges us to reconsider what it means to be human, to be connected across time, to carry within us not only life itself, but the whispers of all who came before. As the sun sets over the ruins, and the microscope glints under fluorescent lab lights, a single thought persists. The story of humanity may not be written solely in stone, text, or memory. It may be written in the language of life itself, coded in the spirals of DNA, waiting for those daring enough to decode it. And so begins the journey, at the intersection of wonder and inquiry, between what we know and what we can only imagine, guiding us toward the deeper questions of consciousness, history, and the profound legacy encoded within ourselves. In the quiet heart of every living cell lies a library more intricate than the grandest archives of human history. DNA, the molecule of life, is both architect and historian, encoding the instructions that build every organism while recording subtle traces of the environments it endures. At first glance, DNA seems straightforward, a double helix of 4 chemical bases, repeating in precise patterns, guiding the synthesis of proteins and shaping the physical world. Yet, beneath this simplicity, there exists a complexity that borders on the poetic. It is a language that speaks not only of form and function, but also, perhaps, of experience. Modern biology has revealed that DNA is not inert. It interacts constantly with its environment, adapting in ways that leave marks across generations. This is the realm of epigenetics, the study of chemical modifications that regulate gene expression without altering the underlying sequence. Methyl groups attach to DNA, Histones shift and twist, and suddenly, the genome is no longer a static blueprint but a responsive, dynamic ledger. In plants and animals, these epigenetic changes can persist across multiple generations, effectively passing on memories of trauma, nutrition, or environmental stress. Mice conditioned to fear a particular odor can pass this anxiety to their offspring. Plants exposed to drought produce progeny more resilient to dehydration. Here, science demonstrates that experience can echo beyond the lifetime of the individual, inscribed in molecules that endure long after the organism itself has vanished. Yet, humans present a more complex picture. Unlike simple organisms, where adaptation often manifests in physical or behavioral changes, human memory has traditionally been understood as a function of the brain. Experiences, knowledge, culture, they reside in neurons, synapses, and the intricate architecture of the mind. Our DNA, according to conventional understanding, is primarily a survival manual, instructions for building bodies, regulating metabolism, and maintaining health. Memory, philosophy, and history are thought to exist only in social constructs. Written texts, oral traditions, or encoded in the delicate connections between neurons. The idea that our cells could also carry traces of human experience stretches the imagination, bridging science with a kind of speculative wonder. But nature rarely conforms to our neat categorizations. The boundary between genetics and experience is more porous than we once believed. Consider transgenerational epigenetic inheritance, a phenomenon observed across diverse species. A butterfly exposed to environmental toxins may produce offspring with altered gene expression, better suited to survive in a contaminated environment. Rodents subjected to stress exhibit changes in stress response genes that persist in multiple generations. Even in humans, studies of descendants of famine survivors reveal metabolic and health patterns influenced by the extreme conditions their ancestors endured. While these patterns are subtle and often limited in scope, they hint at a broader principle. Life carries memory in ways that do not require conscious thought to grasp the significance of this. One must imagine DNA not merely as a sequence of letters, but as a layered multidimensional archive. Each base pair, each chemical modification, encodes not only immediate instructions for survival, but also a record of past challenges and responses. This is where the speculative question arises. If molecular memory can record environmental stress, could it also, under extraordinary circumstances, retain information about human activity, culture, or civilization itself? Could the triumphs and failures of ancient societies leave faint imprints within the strands of our genetic code? Scientific evidence for this remains elusive, but the possibility invites exploration. Consider the mechanisms by which experience can influence DNA. Environmental triggers nutrition, stress, toxins activate cellular pathways that ultimately modify gene expression. These changes, if they occur in germ cells, may be passed to future generations. In plants, exposure to predators or pathogens can prime subsequent generations for enhanced defense. In animals, learned behaviors can subtly influence offspring physiology. These examples illustrate a key principle. Life is not merely reactive. It is historical. The molecules that constitute living beings are shaped by events, and they carry those imprints forward. Contrast this with human culture. Civilizations rise and fall. Knowledge is lost and rediscovered. Technologies appear and vanish. Traditionally, these events leave traces in artifacts, manuscripts, and oral traditions, but what if they left traces deeper, more persistent, within the biology of those who lived them? Imagine that a population exposed to complex societal organization, philosophical inquiry, or advanced engineering might develop epigenetic markers reflecting heightened cognitive or behavioral tendencies. Could these markers, in theory, be passed down, subtly influencing subsequent generations' capacities for problem-solving, creativity, or social cohesion. The science remains speculative, but the framework is tantalizing. DNA, in this view, becomes both blueprint and chronicle. Every organism is a living archive, storing not only the information necessary to survive, but also a molecular reflection of experiences, pressures, and adaptations. It is a ledger that chronicles the interplay between organism and environment, a record that is both deterministic and emergent, constrained by chemistry yet open to contingency. To read this archive is to read the history of life itself, from the simplest cells to the most complex societies. The question becomes, how far could this recording extend? Could it bridge the gap from biology to civilization, from molecular adaptation to the faint echo of human ingenuity? Philosophically, this possibility challenges our understanding of memory, identity, and history. We think of history as external, inscribed in stone, written in books, spoken in stories. But if experience leaves marks in the very fabric of life, then history is not merely something we study. It is something we carry. The rise and fall of empires, the innovations and collapses of societies, might ripple through generations in ways we are only beginning to understand. The implications are profound. The boundary between self and ancestry blurs, and the past becomes not only remembered, but biologically intertwined with the present. Yet skepticism remains essential. Critics remind us that while epigenetic inheritance is real, it is limited. Environmental memories are rarely detailed. They do not encode narratives, technologies, or philosophies. DNA is a medium of chemical instructions, not stories. The challenge, therefore, is twofold: to understand the boundaries of what is scientifically plausible and to explore the imaginative, space where science meets the extraordinary. The tension between these domains, between what can be proven and what can be envisioned, is precisely what makes this inquiry compelling. It is a narrative suspended between reality and possibility, grounded in molecular biology, but open to wonder. In exploring the foundations of DNA and memory, we also encounter the profound complexity of life itself. Each cell is a universe, each molecule a story, each epigenetic mark a potential link to the past. Life is simultaneously predictable and mysterious, governed by chemical laws yet enriched by experience. This duality mirrors the tension between science and speculation that runs through the entire question of genetic memory. The known versus the unknown, evidence versus imagination, doubt versus belief. By acknowledging both, we can craft a narrative that is scientifically credible yet intellectually and emotionally expansive. Ultimately, understanding DNA and memory provides the scaffolding for the larger question. Could human history, in its richness and depth, leave imprints within our biology? To answer this, we must integrate genetics, epigenetics, and evolutionary theory with archaeology, anthropology, and philosophy. We must consider not only what DNA is and does, but also what it could potentially preserve under extraordinary circumstances. The foundations laid in this section create a passage from the measurable realities of biology to the speculative horizons of civilization. Consciousness and legacy as we transition from the molecular to the macrocosmic, from the chemical sequences in our cells to the rise and fall of human societies. One thought emerges. Life itself is a memory machine, recording, responding, and evolving. The human genome is more than a survival manual. It is a historical ledger, a living testament to the interplay between organism, environment, and perhaps, under the most extraordinary circumstances, the achievements of civilization itself. The journey ahead will explore how these possibilities intersect, contrasting scientific rigor with philosophical wonder, evidence with speculation, and reality with imagination. And as we do, the question lingers. If our DNA can remember, what might it be waiting to tell us about the worlds that came before? The past is not always what it seems. Across deserts, jungles, and river valleys, humanity has left behind traces that challenge the timelines and narratives we take for granted. Some ruins speak of ingenuity so advanced, so precise, that they defy the tools and knowledge historically attributed to their creators. And yet, history books often treat them as anomalies, curiosities to be cataloged and explained away. But to look closer, to consider these sites in the light of curiosity and wonder, is to confront a profound question. What if the echoes of these civilizations persist not only in stone, but in the very essence of those who carry their lineage? Take Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey, a site that predates Stonehenge by thousands of years. Towering pillars rise from the earth, each carved with intricate animals and abstract symbols, suggesting a symbolic complexity and social organization far beyond what was thought possible for a society living in the Neolithic. The sophistication is startling. No evidence of permanent settlement, no agriculture sufficient to sustain such construction. Yet the craftsmanship and coordination hint at a collective knowledge almost impossible to explain. Archaeologists debate its purpose: a temple, a gathering place, a ritual site, but the deeper mystery lingers. How did humans, with rudimentary tools and knowledge, conceive, organize, and execute such monumental works? Half a world away, Mohenjo-Daro sits along the Indus River, a city of order and design that astonishes even today's urban planners. Streets laid out in precise grids, sophisticated drainage systems, and standardized weights and measures suggest a civilization with advanced engineering and administrative insight. Yet, written records remain enigmatic, and much of their culture is lost to time. Scholars reconstruct what they can, but the gaps in understanding provoke speculation. How did knowledge of urban planning, mathematics, and civic organization emerge in a society whose origin story remains shrouded? Could these people, whose names and voices are now silent, have encoded something of their intelligence, culture, or memory into those who came after? Then there are the pyramids of Egypt, monuments that defy gravity, geometry, and expectation. The alignment of these colossal structures with celestial bodies, their precise internal chambers, and the sheer scale of construction continue to inspire awe and debate. Mainstream archaeology offers explanations, labor, ingenuity, religious motivation, but alternative interpretations linger in the imagination. Lost technologies, forgotten sciences, and possibly knowledge passed down from cultures we can no longer trace. The contrast is stark. Empirical evidence stands against the mind's longing for a deeper narrative, a story that explains the unexplainable. It is here, in the intersection of stone and speculation, that the connection to human memory, and potentially to DNA, begins to emerge. Across continents, similar mysteries appear. In South America, the Nazca lines stretch across deserts, visible only from above, creating giant patterns whose purpose continues to confound researchers. In Mesopotamia, ziggurats rise in carefully measured tiers, reflecting astronomical and religious precision. The common thread is a sophistication that seems to transcend what should have been possible for these early humans. Could it be a coincidence? Or is there a deeper link, a transmission of knowledge, culture, or intuition, embedded in human life itself, waiting to be traced through biology as well as history? Speculation thrives precisely in the spaces between evidence and interpretation. Archaeology provides dates, materials, and structure, but it cannot fully capture intention, thought processes, or cultural memory. Here, the human mind reaches toward possibilities that science cannot yet confirm. Advanced knowledge lost to catastrophe, forgotten technologies, or even contact between distant civilizations previously considered isolated. Some theorists propose that these anomalies are hints that human evolution and cultural development are more complex than linear models suggest. Perhaps memory, experience, Or ingenuity is not only cultural, but biological, a phenomenon inscribed in the very cells of those who lived it. This is where contrast framing becomes essential. On one side, the rigor of archaeology, history, and anthropology demands evidence: carbon dating, stratigraphy, artifact analysis. On the other, speculation tempts the imagination. What if some knowledge was encoded, preserved, and transmitted beyond conventional means? The tension between these perspectives creates a narrative charged with curiosity and awe, where stone, artifact, and sequence of DNA might each tell a story, but the whole narrative remains tantalizingly out of reach. It is a space that challenges the viewer to hold both doubt and wonder simultaneously, to respect evidence while entertaining the extraordinary. Consider the idea that human intelligence, creativity, and ingenuity may not arise solely from environmental pressures or individual learning, but could also be influenced by inherited molecular memory. If DNA carries traces of adaptive responses in simpler organisms, could it, under extraordinary circumstances, harbor echoes of societal knowledge, problem-solving skills, or collective behavior patterns in humans? Could a population that built complex structures, developed mathematics, or understood celestial mechanics leave subtle imprints within the biological legacy of its descendants? While scientific proof is currently beyond reach, the notion frames these ancient civilizations not just as distant ruins, but as living whispers of possibility, reverberating through time at both cultural and biological levels. The human mind is drawn to patterns. When confronted with precision in ancient architecture or astronomical alignment, we instinctively seek causality, design, and purpose. Archaeologists attempt to satisfy this need with evidence and theory, yet anomalies remain, structures that defy the assumed technological capabilities of their creators, symbols whose meanings are lost, and engineering feats that echo knowledge apparently absent from contemporary societies. These anomalies do more than challenge history. They ignite imagination, prompting us to question whether knowledge can survive in forms beyond writing, beyond memory, perhaps even within life itself. This narrative tension between evidence and imagination is cinematic in its own right. Picture the dust-covered pillars of Göbekli Tepe against the orange dawn, the sun casting long shadows across carvings of predators and prey. Imagine aerial shots of Mohenjo-Daro's grid-like streets, revealing precision only modern cities often achieve. Visualize the pyramids, rising from the desert like frozen suns, their angles aligned with stars that no human observer could see from the ground. These images evoke awe, bridging the tangible and the speculative, and they lay the groundwork for a discussion that stretches from stones to molecules, from civilizations to DNA. Anomalies invite narrative leaps. Consider the possibility of global connections in prehistory, trade networks, migration, or shared knowledge that predates recorded history. Conventional explanations often default to isolated invention or coincidence. Yet parallels in architecture, engineering, and symbolism suggest more than chance. Perhaps knowledge once traveled in ways we cannot yet fully trace. Perhaps the human genome itself carries echoes of these interactions, subtle markers of experience and adaptation embedded over millennia. This is where archaeology meets molecular biology, where evidence meets imagination, and where science begins to entertain questions that border on the extraordinary. Importantly, this section does not discard skepticism, it embraces it. Scientific rigor ensures that interpretations remain grounded in observable reality. Dating techniques, artifact analysis, and comparative studies of human development provide a framework. Yet, within this framework, the anomalies persist. They demand that we ask not only how ancient humans built these structures, but also what might have been preserved beyond the tangible. The traces of knowledge, behavior, and creativity encoded in ways we are only beginning to understand. The duality is essential. Evidence anchors the narrative. Speculation drives the curiosity. And together, they create a cinematic tension that propels the story forward. By examining ancient civilizations through both evidence and imagination, we open a window into a world where DNA could, in theory, serve as a repository of ancestral experience. The precise calculations, engineering feats, and symbolic sophistication of these cultures suggest cognitive capacities that were extraordinary for their time. Could those capacities, under specific conditions, leave biological traces? Could the rise and fall of civilizations, the successes and failures of entire societies, be inscribed at the molecular level in ways we are only beginning to comprehend? The concept stretches both scientific inquiry and philosophical reflection, blending the tangible with the speculative. Ultimately, these ancient civilizations serve as both puzzle and inspiration. They remind us that human history is far more intricate than linear timelines suggest, and that our understanding of memory, culture, and knowledge is incomplete. The ruins provoke awe, spark imagination, and hint at the possibility that life itself might encode not only survival strategies, but the echoes of human ingenuity. The stage is set for the next journey, exploring how these mysteries intersect with the biological mechanisms of memory, and how DNA itself might hold the faintest whispers of civilizations past. As we transition from the marvels of stone and the enigmas of early cities to the molecular realm of inheritance and epigenetic memory, one question looms large. If human experience can leave traces in molecules, how might these ancient achievements resonate within the very fabric of life today? The journey continues, moving from the awe of ruins to the microscopic elegance of DNA, bridging the macrocosm of civilizations with the microcosm of the human genome. The stage is set for the next chapter, a closer examination of genetic echoes and the possibility that the memory of past human experience is written not just in artifacts, but in the strands of life itself. Our DNA is often described as a blueprint, a literal instruction manual that tells our cells how to build organs, regulate functions, and respond to environmental stress. But emerging research suggests it may be far more than a static set of instructions. Within its spiraling helix, there may exist traces of lived experience, molecular imprints left by trauma, adaptation, and even behaviors. Science has begun to illuminate how extreme events, famine, conflict, environmental stress, can echo beyond the individual, subtly shaping the biology of future generations. These are the genetic echoes of human experience, a phenomenon that challenges the way we think about inheritance, memory, and the continuity of life itself. Consider a groundbreaking study of descendants of Holocaust survivors. Researchers observed elevated stress response markers in the DNA of children and grandchildren of those who endured unimaginable trauma. These markers were not learned behaviors or cultural transmission. They were molecular modifications affecting how genes are expressed. This is epigenetic inheritance. The environment leaves its signature on the genome, and those signatures can persist across generations. Similarly, studies of populations exposed to famine have revealed metabolic changes that ripple forward, subtly influencing health and physiology long after the original events. The implications are profound. Experience can leave a tangible, molecular imprint that outlasts the lifetime of the individual. Even in simpler organisms, the evidence is striking. Rodents conditioned to fear specific scents transmit this fear to their offspring. Plants exposed to drought or predation produce progeny better adapted to similar challenges. These examples illustrate that the environment and the experiences it imposes are capable of leaving heritable traces. Life, it seems, is a living archive, a biological historian recording both adaptation and challenge. In these cases, memory is not confined to neurons or conscious thought. it is embedded in molecules that persist, ready to influence subsequent generations. Yet humans introduce a profound complexity. Our cultures, languages, and technologies are not written in genes in any literal sense. Our intelligence allows us to store memory externally, in texts, monuments, and digital media. The inheritance of trauma or stress response markers seems simple by comparison. Still, the principle remains. Experience can leave marks that shape not only the individual but the species. The question arises, if such molecular memory exists for survival-based responses, could it extend to more abstract human experiences, knowledge, creativity, social organization? Could the echoes of civilization itself be traced, faintly, in our biology? Speculative thought has long flirted with the notion that the human genome might harbor ancestral memories. Philosophers and theorists suggest that the patterns of human behavior, instincts, and intuition could carry vestiges of collective experience. While the evidence for encoding complex societal knowledge in DNA is absent, the boundary between the demonstrable and the imaginable invites inquiry. Science shows that the molecule of life is not merely reactive. It is responsive. Epigenetic modifications demonstrate a capacity for historical influence. The speculation arises naturally. If our cells can remember environmental stress, might they also preserve more subtle, less tangible imprints of human achievement, culture, or cognition? Experiments continue to push the frontier. Studies of rodents reveal how learned behaviors, such as problem-solving strategies, can influence neural architecture in subsequent generations. While this does not equate to the direct inheritance of knowledge, it suggests a biological predisposition shaped by ancestral experience. If survival strategies, fear responses, and behavioral tendencies can be modulated epigenetically, the imagination begins to stretch. Could elements of human culture, encoded as behavioral tendencies, be transmitted similarly? Could intuition, artistic flair, or spatial reasoning, shaped by ancient challenges or innovations, subtly influence our capacities today? Contrast is key in this exploration. On one side, peer-reviewed studies demonstrate concrete molecular mechanisms, measurable chemical modifications, and statistically significant effects. On the other, speculative interpretations imagine a genome as a repository of experience far beyond survival, a living archive of civilization itself. The tension between evidence and imagination drives curiosity, a cinematic rhythm echoing the dance between skepticism and wonder. We are grounded in fact, yet propelled by the audacity to ask questions that brush against the extraordinary. Consider the broader implications. If human DNA can preserve traces of trauma, adaptation, and behavior, it becomes a living record of our species' history. Each generation inherits not only genes for biological survival, but also subtle influences shaped by ancestral experience. Trauma leaves a mark. Resilience leaves a mark. Could the rise and fall of ancient civilizations, the ingenuity of societies long vanished, leave similarly faint imprints, perhaps not explicit knowledge, but inclinations, tendencies, or capacities influenced by ancestral life? The mind reels at the possibility. This is where the narrative bridges science with wonder. The rigorous data is compelling. Epigenetic markers, histone modifications, and methylation patterns provide clear examples of how life carries experience forward. Beyond this, speculation invites philosophical reflection. Memory may not be solely neurological, culture not entirely external. What if the history of human achievement, the echoes of monumental efforts, or the collective experiences of societies are encoded subtly, waiting to be uncovered in the molecular memory of life? It is a question that elevates the discussion from biology to existential inquiry, yet caution tempers excitement. The inheritance of complex knowledge, mathematics, philosophy, Engineering is almost certainly beyond the reach of epigenetic mechanisms. Skeptics emphasize that while molecular memory of stress or adaptation is proven, the inheritance of civilization-level knowledge is not. Science operates within strict parameters: evidence, reproducibility, and mechanistic clarity. Yet the mind cannot help but wonder. The tension between skepticism and curiosity is fertile ground for exploration, a space where cinematic storytelling thrives, and where viewers are invited to imagine what science cannot yet prove. Interestingly, patterns emerge when considering the intersection of genetics and culture. Human populations with long histories of environmental challenge often display adaptations, both physiological and behavioral, that hint at complex interactions between biology and experience. Heightened problem-solving abilities, resilience, and social cohesion may not be encoded as explicit instructions, but as predispositions shaped over generations. If basic survival strategies can be epigenetically transmitted, could the accumulation of cultural experience leave subtle biases in cognition or behavior? Could echoes of societal organization, creativity, or ingenuity be faintly present in the genetic legacy we carry? The concept challenges linear models of inheritance. Genes are not static. They respond, adapt, and in some cases, remember. Human experience, it seems, may leave traces not only in texts, monuments, or oral traditions, but in the living archive of DNA itself. The boundary between biology and culture blurs, hinting at a deeper interconnectedness between individual, ancestry, and society. The evidence is subtle, incomplete, and often indirect, but it is enough to provoke questions that extend far beyond conventional genetics, nudging us toward the speculative frontier. Consider the idea of intuition as a form of inherited memory. Humans often demonstrate sudden insights, problem-solving flashes, or inexplicable creativity that feels ancestral in origin. Could such abilities, shaped over countless generations of social and environmental pressures, carry faint molecular echoes of past experience? Science cannot yet answer this, but the hypothesis aligns with observed epigenetic mechanisms. Stress responses, metabolic patterns, and behavioral tendencies demonstrate that life carries history. Extending this principle, however tentatively, to human cultural experience creates a narrative tension that is both intellectually and emotionally compelling. As we explore genetic echoes, the cinematic scope expands. We move from the microscopic molecules, methyl groups, histone modifications, to the macroscopic societies, civilizations, and the forces that shape them. The narrative thread binds epigenetic science with philosophical inquiry, grounding speculation in measurable phenomena while allowing the imagination to traverse possibilities. The tension between what is known and what is imagined becomes a central theme. Evidence provides anchor points, while speculation provides horizon lines, guiding the audience's wonder and engagement. Finally, the section builds toward a threshold. The known is documented, the speculative is tantalizing, and the next step is to consider how these echoes of experience may intersect with the broader sweep of human history and the memory of civilizations themselves. If life can remember trauma and adaptation, what might it remember about ingenuity, social cohesion, or cultural sophistication? The stage is set for exploring the extraordinary possibility that DNA could carry the faint imprint of humanity's collective experience, bridging biology with the mysteries of our past. This journey from measurable epigenetic mechanisms to the speculative potential of inherited cultural memory leaves the speculative or measurable epigenetic mechanisms to the speculative potential of inherited cultural memory leaves the audience poised between wonder and skepticism. Science provides rigor, observation, and data. Imagination provides context, narrative, and awe. Together, They create a cinematic tension, a bridge between fact and possibility, doubt and belief, known and unknown. And as we transition to the next section, the focus shifts from molecular echoes to the profound question of civilization itself, how the achievements, enigmas, and sophistication of ancient societies might resonate across generations, perhaps encoded in the very strands of life that persist to this day. The notion that DNA could carry memories of ancestral civilizations ignites imagination, yet it also ignites fierce debate. Science thrives on skepticism, and here, skepticism is not only warranted, it is essential. The majority of geneticists and neuroscientists assert a fundamental truth. Memory, as we understand it, requires the complex architecture of the brain. Neurons form networks, synapses encode experience, and the dynamic firing of circuits shapes learning and recall. DNA, in contrast, is largely a set of instructions for constructing the body and regulating its functions. It is not, in conventional understanding, a repository for cultural knowledge, history, or learned skills. This distinction frames the first line of criticism. The extraordinary claims of ancestral memory appear incompatible with the mechanics of life as currently understood. Epigenetics, while revolutionary, also has boundaries. Studies consistently show that environmental stressors can leave chemical marks on DNA, influencing gene expression across generations. Trauma, famine, or exposure to toxins can shift methylation patterns or alter histone modifications, subtly impacting physiology, behavior, or stress responses. Yet these changes are limited. They do not encode narratives, problem-solving techniques, or the nuanced knowledge of complex societies. Critics emphasize this point. While epigenetics can influence resilience or predisposition, it is not a detailed archive of human civilization. The skepticism is rooted in measurable science, in repeatable experiments, and in the understanding that molecular memory has constraints dictated by biology. Despite these criticisms, fringe theorists and alternative researchers persist. Some propose that human DNA is far more than a blueprint. It is a library, storing echoes of ancestral experience, encoded not in neurons but in nucleotides. These ideas often cite patterns in behavior, intuition, or creativity as potential evidence of inherited cognitive memory. They ask us to imagine a world in which the rise and fall of civilizations, the development of art, mathematics, or astronomy leaves subtle imprints in our very biology. The claims are extraordinary, and they are precisely what makes this debate so captivating. Science, grounded in evidence, encounters speculation, grounded in imagination. Herein lies the epistemological tension. How do we evaluate truth when the known mechanisms of biology clash with the possibility of extraordinary inheritance? Skepticism insists on falsifiable claims, on methods that can be replicated, measured, and scrutinized. Yet speculation thrives in the shadows of uncertainty, where the mind dares to ask, what if? The viewer is confronted with a dual narrative on one side, the rigor of peer-reviewed studies, controlled experiments, and the limits of epigenetic influence. On the other, the tantalizing suggestion that life might carry traces of human history in ways we have yet to understand. This tension is itself cinematic, a story of knowledge, doubt, and wonder. Critics also highlight the risks of conflating correlation with causation. Observed behavioral tendencies or physiological responses in descendants may reflect cultural inheritance, social environment, or statistical noise rather than molecular memory. For example, children of trauma survivors often inherit behavioral patterns not because of DNA, but because of upbringing, observation, and social conditioning. Science demands that we disentangle these factors, a process that underscores the difficulty of proving claims about ancestral memory. Yet, the very challenge invites deeper inquiry. What mechanisms might exist that are subtle, complex, and currently beyond our detection. The unknown beckons as powerfully as the known. Alternative. Researchers often point to anomalies in archaeology and anthropology as circumstantial support for their theories. They highlight sudden bursts of cultural advancement, the apparent precocity of certain societies, or unexplained ingenuity in ancient construction. Could such phenomena, they ask, leave molecular traces in humans? Skeptics countered that these are sociocultural phenomena, unrelated to biology. The contrast between these positions, mainstream science versus speculative interpretation, creates a narrative tension, a cinematic rhythm between doubt and curiosity, skepticism and possibility. It is a story of inquiry as much as it is of discovery. Some proponents push even further, proposing that consciousness itself might interact with DNA in ways science has yet to uncover. Here, the debate enters philosophical territory. If consciousness is not strictly confined to neurons, but is, in some measure, distributed or influenced by biological patterns at the molecular level, then perhaps the potential for inherited memory becomes less implausible. Critics, however, caution against conflating philosophy with empirical science. Evidence remains sparse, and the mechanisms are hypothetical. The dialogue between these perspectives, rigorous empiricism and speculative philosophy, underscores the core tension of this entire narrative. How far can imagination stretch before it breaks against the walls of evidence? The controversy also invites reflection on how knowledge is evaluated. Science relies on reproducibility, falsifiability, and consensus. Speculation, by contrast, relies on imagination, synthesis, and the courage to ask questions that have no immediate answer. Both approaches serve the human quest for understanding, but they operate on different axes. The intersection is compelling. When speculative inquiry is informed by scientific principles, it can expand the horizon of what we consider possible, even as it respects the constraints of what can be proven. In this sense, the debate itself becomes a form of storytelling, blending evidence and wonder into a narrative that is both intellectually rigorous and emotionally gripping. Historical examples also illustrate the challenge of interpretation. Early human societies often exhibited bursts of technological or cultural advancement that appear abrupt in the limited archaeological record. Were these the result of sudden innovation, cultural diffusion, or lost knowledge? Skeptics favor explanations grounded in environment, population dynamics, or gradual learning. Speculative theorists suggest that some form of inherited memory, encoded in ways we cannot yet measure, may have played a role. The uncertainty is where the story gains its cinematic dimension, a tension between what we know and what we dream, framed by evidence and bounded by imagination. Furthermore, the limitations of current epigenetic research must be acknowledged. While modifications can persist for a few generations, the durability over centuries or millennia is largely unknown. Skeptics highlight that claims of ancestral memory spanning civilizations are far beyond what current biology can support. Yet, the gap between what is measured and what is imaginable creates a space for wonder. It is here that the story thrives, in the interplay between the finite and the infinite, the observable and the speculative, the grounded and the extraordinary. This tension is mirrored in the audience's experience. We are naturally drawn to mystery, to anomalies that challenge our understanding. The idea that DNA might carry echoes of human civilization is seductive precisely because it is unproven. It invites curiosity, critical thinking, and imagination simultaneously. Skepticism does not diminish the allure. It sharpens it. The audience is encouraged to weigh evidence, consider plausibility, and entertain possibilities, all while being anchored in the scientific method. It is a narrative of engagement, intellect, and wonder, where critical thinking enhances, rather than diminishes, awe. Interestingly, Some controversies also touch on ethics and interpretation. If ancestral memory were proven, it would force a reconsideration of identity, responsibility, and the continuity of culture. Could we inherit tendencies not only from immediate ancestors, but from civilizations long vanished? Skeptics caution against overextension, emphasizing the need for empirical rigor. Yet the speculation sparks reflection on the broader implications of biology, culture, and memory. The dialogue between these perspectives illuminates not only science but philosophy, highlighting the deep questions that drive human inquiry. In this section, the contrast between science and speculation is more than rhetorical, it is structural. On one hand, peer-reviewed research, experiments, and theoretical models constrain claims about genetic memory. On the other, extraordinary hypotheses, historical anomalies, and philosophical considerations expand the narrative horizon. This duality provides tension, drama, and intellectual engagement. It is a cinematic framework where evidence anchors the story while speculation propels it forward, inviting the audience to navigate between certainty and possibility. Ultimately, the controversies and counterpoints serve a critical purpose. They establish the rules of engagement for the mind. The audience is invited to think critically, to respect the boundaries of scientific knowledge, yet to hold space for wonder. They learn to ask questions like, what is proven? What is plausible? What remains unknown? And how might the unknown reshape our understanding of human history, biology, and consciousness? The section becomes not only an exploration of skepticism and debate, but a primer in epistemology, guiding the viewer in how to navigate extraordinary claims without abandoning curiosity. As this section concludes, the tension remains unresolved, but intentionally so. The scientific criticisms are clear. Memory requires neural networks, epigenetic changes are limited, and detailed knowledge is unlikely to be encoded in DNA. The speculative possibilities remain tantalizing. Could faint echoes of ancestral experience persist in molecular form, influencing behavior, cognition, or even creativity? The audience is left poised between these poles, ready to journey into the next section, where speculative frontiers, philosophical implications, and the interplay of consciousness and biology take center stage. The narrative momentum shifts from critique to curiosity, setting the stage for exploration without abandoning the rigor that grounds the story. Imagine a world where the double helix of DNA is not only a blueprint for building the human body but also a silent archive of history, a repository for the experiences, struggles, and triumphs of our ancestors. The notion stretches the imagination, yet it is rooted in phenomena that science has begun to uncover. Epigenetics demonstrates that life carries memory, chemical tags on DNA, molecular switches, and histone modifications can preserve traces of stress, adaptation, and environmental responses across generations. But what if these molecular markers are just the beginning? What if the same strands that guide our cells might, in some way, harbor echoes of human thought, culture, and civilization itself? The leap from observable science to extraordinary possibility requires a careful bridge. On one side, there is empirical evidence. DNA responds to environmental pressures, influencing development, behavior, and even disease susceptibility. On the other side lies speculation, philosophical inquiry, and imaginative extrapolation. To navigate this terrain, we must consider not only the molecules of life, but also the emergent properties of consciousness, society, and collective memory. The story is not just biological, it is cosmic, temporal, and conceptual, spanning microcosm and macrocosm, cell and civilization. Quantum consciousness, a field still in its infancy, provides one provocative lens. While mainstream neuroscience attributes memory to networks of neurons, some theorists propose that consciousness itself may be more fundamental, intertwined with quantum processes at the cellular or subatomic level. If this is even partially true, then the classical boundaries between brain, body, and environment blur. Conscious experience could, in theory, influence biological substrates in ways we cannot yet fully measure, creating a conceptual space where memory and information are not confined to synapses alone. It is here, at the edge of physics and biology, that the idea of inherited cognitive echoes gains plausibility, not as an established fact, but as a horizon for inquiry. The notion of collective memory further expands the canvas. Anthropologists, psychologists, and cultural theorists have long discussed how societies encode knowledge, not only in texts and monuments, but in shared rituals, narratives, and behaviors. Collective memory shapes identity, resilience, and decision-making across generations. Epigenetics demonstrates that certain survival-based responses can be biologically transmitted. Could these two forms of inheritance, cultural and molecular, intersect in subtle ways? Might predispositions toward problem-solving, spatial reasoning, or social coordination reflect more than individual learning, hinting at ancestral experience embedded at the molecular level? The bridge from cultural memory to biological memory is speculative, yet it invites us to consider human experience as a continuum rather than a collection of isolated events. Visualize the cinematic contrasts that define this narrative. Microscopic strands of DNA, twisting and folding within the nucleus of a cell, juxtaposed with the vast remnants of ancient cities, pyramids, and monuments. Zoom further out to celestial vistas, stars forming and dying, reminding us of our temporal and cosmic context. The story moves across scales, from molecules to monuments to the cosmos itself, suggesting that memory, whether biological, cultural, or even quantum, exists within layers of interconnection. It is a narrative of resonance where the past, present, and potential future coexist in a tapestry woven from matter, energy, and experience. DNA as a data storage medium is another domain of inquiry that lends plausibility to the extraordinary. Researchers have already demonstrated that synthetic DNA can store digital information with incredible density and durability. Conceptually, the human genome could function as a naturally occurring archive, capable of storing more than just structural instructions. While there is no direct evidence that human experience or civilization-level knowledge is encoded in DNA, the mechanics of storage, replication, and longevity provide a metaphorical scaffold for imagining how molecular memory might operate on a broader scale. The leap is imaginative, yes, but grounded in technological reality, allowing the mind to explore possibilities without abandoning scientific plausibility. Consider the philosophical implications of this bridge. If DNA carries traces of experience, stress, adaptation, behavior, then life itself becomes a chronicle of history, not only of survival, but of cognition and culture. Evolution, in this sense, is not merely a process of selection, but also of memory, an accumulation of influence, adaptation, and perhaps even learning across generations. Civilization, then, may leave echoes in the biology of its inheritors, subtle markers that influence intuition, predisposition, and creativity. The idea is audacious, blending biology, culture, and philosophy into a conceptual whole that is at once speculative and intellectually compelling. Critics rightly caution that this remains in the realm of hypothesis. Epigenetic mechanisms have limits. Complex knowledge, as we understand it, requires neural encoding, not chemical tags on nucleotides. Yet the boundary between skepticism and speculation is precisely where curiosity thrives. The cinematic tension emerges from this contrast, what we know with certainty versus what we dare to imagine. Evidence anchors the narrative, but imagination propels it forward, opening vistas that are not yet measurable, but not entirely inconceivable. It is a dance between rigor and wonder, structured and expansive, empirical and philosophical. Interdisciplinary perspectives enrich this exploration. Neuroscience, physics, epigenetics, anthropology, and philosophy converge to create a narrative ecosystem in which extraordinary questions can be entertained without abandoning scientific integrity. Quantum models suggest that information may exist in non-local, subtle forms. Epigenetics shows that experience leaves chemical traces. Anthropology demonstrates the persistence of collective knowledge. When woven together, these strands suggest a continuum, a spectrum in which life is both reactive and receptive, biological and experiential. This is the bridge from science to speculation, a careful crossing that maintains credibility while opening the imagination. Historical and contemporary evidence invites further reflection. Consider the recurring bursts of innovation in human societies, the sudden development of architecture, mathematics, or astronomy. Traditional explanations emphasize environmental pressures, social organization, or trial and error learning. Yet, speculative interpretation asks, might these achievements leave faint imprints in the human genome, predisposing descendants to certain cognitive or creative capacities? The idea is not presented as fact, but as a hypothesis worth entertaining, a conceptual tool for bridging the known and the possible. The tension is both intellectual and cinematic, echoing the awe we feel when confronting ancient ruins alongside the microscopic elegance of life itself. Cinematic storytelling thrives on contrast, and here it is literal. The camera of the mind moves from the atomic scale, the phosphate backbone of DNA, the twists of the double helix to monumental scale, the pillars of Göbekli Tepe, the streets of Mohenjo-Daro, the pyramids aligned with celestial bodies. Overlay these with cosmic imagery. Galaxies spiraling, stars being born and dying, the vast continuum of time. The narrative becomes multidimensional, a meditation on memory, civilization, biology, and existence. The contrast between the finite and the infinite mirrors the epistemological tension explored in prior sections. Science versus speculation, evidence versus imagination, skepticism versus awe. Quantum consciousness offers additional narrative depth. If consciousness interacts with biology at fundamental levels, then memory, learning, and experience may have subtle effects on molecular structure. While this remains highly theoretical, it opens a conceptual door. Life is a system capable of recording, transmitting, and preserving information in ways we do not yet fully comprehend. DNA may not encode explicit knowledge of civilization, but could it interact with consciousness to influence perception, intuition, or creativity? The question is tantalizing, blurring the boundaries between biology, physics, and philosophy, and expanding the viewer's imagination while remaining tethered to plausible mechanisms. Interpreting DNA as a repository for civilization-level memory also invites reflection on time. Generations of humans have lived, built, and learned, only for the physical traces of their efforts to decay or vanish. Stone erodes, texts are lost, oral traditions fade. Could the molecular dimension of life provide a subtler, more durable medium, capable of preserving echoes of experience that survive catastrophes, migrations, or cultural collapse? This speculative horizon expands the narrative scope, allowing us to consider life itself as a ledger of existence, an archive written not in ink or stone, but in molecules and patterns, resilient across millennia. The interplay between science and speculation also highlights the human drive for meaning. We are not content with mere survival. We seek continuity, connection, and resonance across generations. The idea that DNA might carry echoes of past civilizations appeals not only to curiosity, but to a deep existential yearning, to be part of something larger, to inherit wisdom, resilience, or creativity from those who came before. It is a story that speaks to both intellect and emotion, bridging empirical inquiry with the profound desire to understand our place in time, society, and the cosmos. Yet even as we explore these possibilities, caution remains essential. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. No current research proves that human civilization is encoded in DNA. The speculative leap must be acknowledged, framed as a what-if and balanced against scientific rigor. It is the tension itself, the oscillation between evidence and imagination, that drives narrative engagement. The audience is invited to hold both perspectives simultaneously. The humility of skepticism and the exhilaration of curiosity, grounded inquiry and soaring wonder. The cinematic arc of this section closes on resonance. From the microscopic elegance of nucleotides to the grandeur of monuments and the infinity of the cosmos, the narrative threads converge in a single question. If life can record stress, adaptation, and behavior, might it also record something deeper? Could the echoes of civilization, the ingenuity, resilience, and culture of our ancestors leave subtle imprints that ripple across generations? Science cannot yet answer this definitively, but the question itself is transformative. Reframing our understanding of inheritance, memory, and the human story. As the bridge between science and speculation solidifies, the stage is set for the next narrative leap. We have traversed molecular mechanisms, explored ancestral trauma, and confronted skepticism. Now, the horizon extends further, toward consciousness, philosophical reflection, and the intersection of biology, culture, and existential wonder. The audience is invited to continue the journey, balancing what is known with what might be possible, and imagining a world where the past lives quietly within us, waiting to be recognized. If DNA were more than a blueprint, if it were a silent archive capable of storing echoes of human experience, the implications for identity and legacy are staggering. What does it mean to inherit not only genes, but the lived experiences, traumas, triumphs, and knowledge of generations past? Could a person be, in part, a vessel for the echoes of civilizations long vanished, carrying within them subtle imprints of ingenuity, survival, and culture? These are not questions that biology alone can answer. They are philosophical, existential, and deeply human. They force us to confront the fragile boundary between self and ancestry, between the fleeting moment of an individual life and the enduring continuity of life itself. Consciousness enters this dialogue as both a lens and a bridge. While DNA may encode molecular responses, consciousness shapes experience, perception, and understanding. It is through consciousness that humans interpret culture, learn, and innovate. Could consciousness also mediate between inherited biological predispositions and accumulated cultural knowledge? Might our awareness be subtly informed by experiences encoded at a molecular level, creating a resonance between the past and present? While these ideas remain speculative, they invite reflection on the interconnectedness of biology, mind, and society, a narrative that is simultaneously scientific, philosophical, and cinematic. Time, in this context, becomes a storyteller. Civilization is ephemeral. Cities rise and fall, monuments crumble, and knowledge can vanish within centuries. Yet DNA persists, replicated, reshaped, and passed down through countless generations. It is a molecular chronicle, indifferent to the triumphs or failures of empires, yet potentially preserving traces of lived experience. The contrast between the transient and the enduring is profound. Whereas stone erodes and text decay, the molecular code of life continues, carrying with it the story of survival and adaptation, if not explicit culture. This tension, the fleeting versus the persistent, forms the cinematic backbone of the narrative, guiding the audience to reflect on human existence in deep time. Consider a time lapse. Early humans foraging, discovering fire, building shelters, learning to communicate. Civilization emerges. Agriculture, cities, trade, art, and philosophy. Yet as civilizations rise, they inevitably decline, leaving behind ruins, forgotten scripts, and scattered artifacts. DNA, however, persists through these ebbs and flows, transmitted across generations, quietly recording responses to famine, climate, conflict, and stress. It is a hidden ledger of survival, one that may influence not only physical traits but, hypothetically, behavioral tendencies, instincts, and even creativity. The story unfolds across scales, linking the intimate molecular world to the grandeur of human history. Philosophically, this raises questions about identity. Are we simply the sum of our experiences, memories, and choices, or are we also shaped by ancestral echoes encoded within us? The concept of self expands beyond the immediate, encompassing millennia of adaptation, challenge, and evolution. Human identity, in this framework, is not confined to a single lifetime, but is entwined with lineage and legacy. The possibility that DNA might carry faint imprints of past civilizations forces a reconsideration of what it means to be human. A single consciousness, a collection of generations, or perhaps both. The persistence of genetic material contrasts starkly with the impermanence of culture, yet it also interacts with it. Culture shapes behavior, society, and values. Genetics shapes physiology, predisposition, and resilience. The bridge between these domains consciousness may allow inherited tendencies to find expression within cultural contexts. For example, heightened spatial reasoning or pattern recognition could facilitate achievements in architecture or mathematics, while behavioral resilience might aid survival in times of upheaval. The interplay between inherited biology and emergent culture hints at a continuum in which human experience, learning, and adaptation are dynamically intertwined. Cinematic storytelling illuminates these ideas. Visualize the slow unfolding of evolution. Microscopic life forms giving rise to complex organisms. Early humans experimenting with tools. The slow rise of civilizations and their inevitable decline. Ruins crumble beneath the weight of centuries. Scrolls and tablets fade. Monuments are buried beneath sand and soil. Yet in the molecular realm, life continues unabated. DNA, replicated billions of times across generations, preserves echoes of adaptation, experience, and perhaps subtle behavioral tendencies. The narrative moves seamlessly between macro and micro scales, emphasizing continuity amid impermanence. Consciousness, when framed alongside this continuity, becomes both observer and participant. Humans interpret the past, understand the present, and anticipate the future. It is through conscious reflection that we perceive the tension between ephemeral civilizations and persistent biology. If DNA carries even subtle imprints of ancestral experiences, consciousness may act as the interface, translating molecular traces into behavior, intuition, or creative insight. While speculative, this notion provides a conceptual anchor for exploring the convergence of biology, culture, and identity. The human legacy, in this sense, is not solely material. Ruins, monuments, and texts tell stories of civilizations, but they are fragmentary and vulnerable. Genetic inheritance, by contrast, is resilient, transmitted with precision and altered subtly by experience. If molecular memory were to encode more than survival traits, perhaps tendencies, inclinations, or even primitive cultural resonances, then our understanding of legacy expands. We are not only inheritors of genes and environment, but potentially inheritors of echoes of human history, offering a continuity that surpasses individual lifespans. Time-lapse visual metaphors reinforce this narrative. Picture civilizations flourishing, followed by decline and decay, while beneath the surface, DNA silently persists. The camera of the mind pans across generations, tracing lines of inheritance, mapping adaptation, and suggesting continuity. Evolution is not only a process of survival, but a subtle, ongoing dialogue between past and present, mediated by biology and expressed through consciousness. The cinematic effect is both humbling and awe-inspiring. The transcendent achievements of humanity juxtaposed with the enduring machinery of life. Exploring this further, consider behavioral epigenetics. Studies reveal that trauma, famine, and environmental stressors can influence gene expression across multiple generations. While these changes are limited in scope, they demonstrate that experience leaves a molecular trace. Consciousness, culture, and behavior interact with biology in complex ways, suggesting a dialogue between environment, heredity, and identity. The question arises, if simple environmental experiences can leave detectable molecular marks, could more complex societal or cultural experiences, encoded in subtle ways, also influence descendants? The answer remains unknown, but the inquiry itself invites philosophical reflection. This line of thought raises existential questions about continuity and meaning. Civilizations collapse, knowledge is lost, and individuals perish. Yet life persists. DNA, consciousness, and culture form overlapping networks, each with distinct but interconnected lifespans. Could molecular memory, combined with consciousness, provide a form of resilience, a thread that carries fragments of human experience through time? If so, identity becomes multi-layered, personal, ancestral, cultural, and perhaps even civilizational. Humans may be simultaneously individuals and vessels of accumulated history, a bridge between the ephemeral and the enduring. Cinematic contrasts continue to shape the narrative. From the intimate scale of DNA spirals to the grandeur of architectural marvels, from the fleeting life of a city to the persistence of molecular patterns, the story oscillates between microcosm and macrocosm. Time-lapse sequences show civilizations rising and falling, forests growing and being cleared, rivers changing course, mountains eroding. Amid this flux, DNA remains a constant, a molecular ledger of adaptation and survival. Consciousness, reflection, and culture mediate the expression of this molecular heritage, creating a dynamic interplay between what endures and what is transient. Philosophical implications emerge naturally from this framework. If inherited molecular traces influence behavior, cognition, or creativity, then human history is not lost to time but subtly carried forward. Identity becomes a collaborative construction, shaped by individual experience and ancestral echoes. The human story extends beyond the present, linking past civilizations, contemporary culture, and potential future achievements. DNA is no longer merely a biological scaffold, but a conceptual bridge connecting time, consciousness, and legacy. At the intersection of science and philosophy, questions multiply. What responsibilities accompany this potential continuity? If we inherit more than genes, if we inherit traces of societal knowledge or cultural resilience, how might this shape ethical, creative, and existential choices? Could humanity learn to harness this latent continuity, consciously shaping legacy across generations? These reflections situate the audience in a narrative that is simultaneously scientific, speculative, and profoundly human, blending inquiry with awe. Finally, the section emphasizes perspective. Civilizations are fleeting. Time is vast. Human life is brief, yet consciousness allows reflection, memory, and aspiration. DNA, as a persistent medium, carries the potential for continuity beyond individual lifetimes. This duality, ephemeral culture and enduring biology, anchors the cinematic narrative, inviting viewers to meditate on the scope of existence. The interplay of time, inheritance, and consciousness provides a framework for understanding identity, meaning, and the human place in deep history. The conclusion of this section is both reflective and anticipatory. By exploring consciousness, DNA, and human legacy, We approach a synthesis, the fleeting brilliance of civilizations, the persistence of molecular life, and the potential bridging role of consciousness. The stage is set for the next narrative leap, where evidence from unexplained phenomena and anomalies may illuminate subtle traces of inherited memory, further expanding the horizon of possibility. The audience is left in contemplation, poised between scientific rigor and imaginative speculation, ready to explore the next chapter of the human story. Imagine standing at the threshold of a discovery so profound it challenges everything you know about human history, identity, and potential. Within the very cells of your body, encoded in the intricate double helix of DNA, there might lie a library, a repository of experiences, skills, and knowledge accumulated across countless generations. Could it be possible that fragments of lost civilizations, forgotten arts, or vanished philosophies are quietly preserved within us, awaiting awakening? The notion stretches the imagination, merging biology, philosophy, and cosmic wonder into a tapestry of possibilities that is at once thrilling and humbling. Speculation of this magnitude naturally raises caution. Current science shows no direct evidence that complex knowledge engineering, mathematics, literature is encoded in human DNA, yet the mechanisms of epigenetics hint at subtle traces of ancestral experience. Molecular markers left by trauma, environmental adaptation, or learned behaviors are tangible examples of life remembering. If nature can store and transmit information about survival and stress, why not, in principle, extend that concept to more abstract forms of memory? The bridge from molecular memory to latent ancestral knowledge is speculative, yes, but it invites the mind to explore the boundary between possibility and imagination. Consider the cinematic scale of this vision. Picture the rising sun illuminating the ruins of a lost city, its once grand streets now silent and overgrown. Nearby, a modern laboratory hums with fluorescent lights and the quiet pulse of sequencing machines. DNA strands twist under microscopes, tiny helical archives containing the accumulated history of countless generations. The juxtaposition is striking. The impermanence of civilization contrasted with the resilience of life. The external ruins mirrored by the internal molecular scaffolding. In this contrast, the narrative tension emerges. Awe of what has been lost, fear of what remains unknown, and hope for what might yet be rediscovered. The idea of latent knowledge in DNA raises provocative questions about learning and creativity. What if the intuition of a scientist, the artistry of a musician, or the ingenuity of an engineer could in part be influenced by ancestral echoes? Could certain insights emerge spontaneously, as if whispered by generations long gone? Cognitive scientists note that talent, predisposition, and behavioral tendencies have partial heritable components. While these do not equate to conscious memory, they hint at the subtle ways experience and biology may intersect. The cinematic allure of this notion lies not in certainty, but in the space it opens for wonder. The possibility that humans are vessels for more than genes alone. Ancient civilizations provide a compelling backdrop for this speculative horizon. Göbekli Tepe, Mohenjo-Daro, the pyramids of Egypt, all sites of extraordinary sophistication, often appearing abruptly in history. Could fragments of knowledge, once encoded in culture, technology, or ritual, survive within human biology, even after the collapse of the societies that birthed them? While mainstream archaeology cannot yet support such claims, speculation invites us to reimagine inheritance as multidimensional, not only cultural and technological, but potentially molecular. DNA, in this context, becomes more than a biological script. It becomes a bridge across time, a latent archive of human possibility. Imagine a narrative crescendo, a child instinctively solving a puzzle their ancestors once confronted, a mathematician suddenly perceiving patterns lost to centuries, or an artisan intuitively crafting with a skill echoing ancient mastery. These scenarios hover at the edge of possibility, blending imagination with subtle scientific plausibility. They capture the cinematic tension of awe and fear. Awe at the richness of human inheritance, fear of the unknown encoded within ourselves, and hope for the untapped potential hidden in ourselves. The narrative draws the viewer into a reflection, not only on history, but on the intimate connection between past and present. Scientific limitations temper this vision. Knowledge, as we understand it, art, literature, engineering, requires context, experience, and neural encoding. DNA does not record explicit memories in the way a library or hard drive does. Epigenetic markers, while fascinating, encode patterns of adaptation, stress responses, and behavioral tendencies, not explicit cultural knowledge. Yet even these modest forms of memory offer a compelling metaphor. Life has the capacity to record, transmit, and influence across generations. This tension between what is scientifically measurable and what remains imaginatively possible fuels both curiosity and philosophical inquiry. The cinematic storytelling continues with visual contrasts. Zoom in on a strand of DNA, spiraling with elegant precision, adorned with chemical markers like tiny flags of experience. Pull back to reveal the vastness of human history. Crumbling temples, half-buried scrolls, and cities swallowed by sand. Overlay cosmic vistas, galaxies spinning, stars igniting and fading, the rhythm of the universe echoing the cycles of human endeavor. The narrative spans scales and epochs, reminding viewers that the question of inherited memory is both intimate and universal, grounded in biology, yet touching the vastness of time and existence. Speculation also extends into technology and philosophy. Synthetic DNA storage demonstrates that life's molecular architecture can encode vast quantities of data. If humans can manipulate DNA to store digital information, might nature itself have evolved analogous systems, optimized over millions of years, to retain information essential for survival and adaptation? Philosophically, this opens a dialogue about continuity, legacy, and the limits of knowledge. Could civilization, in ways subtle and indirect, persist through biology, shaping the intuition, creativity, and resilience of future generations? The idea is both exhilarating and humbling, inviting viewers to reimagine the very boundaries of inheritance. The potential for rediscovery of lost knowledge engages both hope and existential reflection. If fragments of civilization's architectural ingenuity, agricultural methods, or philosophical insights remain encoded at a molecular level, what responsibilities accompany that inheritance? Could understanding these latent echoes guide humanity toward a more informed, harmonious future? The narrative tension is palpable, the thrill of hidden potential balanced against the caution demanded by scientific integrity. Audience engagement arises from this oscillation between curiosity and critical thought. Wonder and skepticism, cinematic metaphor enriches these ideas. Visualize an explorer standing in the ruins of a forgotten city, tracing patterns in crumbling walls that mirror sequences in DNA spirals. The echo of human endeavor resonates in both architecture and biology. Time-lapse sequences depict civilizations emerging, flourishing, and fading, while molecular patterns endure, subtly shaping descendants' behavior and potential. The imagery conveys a continuum, from ephemeral human creations to the enduring script of life, suggesting that memory and legacy may persist in unexpected ways. Speculation need not be utopian or purely inspirational. There is also the shadow of caution, the fear of unknown inheritances. What if molecular echoes carry trauma, conflict, or destructive behaviors? Epigenetic studies demonstrate that stress, famine, and environmental hardship can influence gene expression across generations. Could the molecular legacy of human civilization encode not only innovation, but also error, hubris, or ethical failings? The cinematic tension deepens as awe, hope, and apprehension converge, reminding viewers that the inheritance of memory, if it exists, is profoundly complex and morally resonant. The crescendo of this section is philosophical. Rediscovering lost knowledge, whether encoded biologically or merely imagined, compels reflection on what it means to be human. We are heirs to both visible and invisible histories, shaped by the ephemeral triumphs and enduring resilience of those who came before. Consciousness, culture, and biology intersect, suggesting that legacy is multi-layered. Not merely the monuments we build or the texts we leave, but the subtle molecular traces of experience transmitted across generations. The speculative horizon challenges us to reconsider inheritance, identity, and potential in this narrative. Curiosity and imagination guide inquiry. Scientific constraints remind us that much remains unproven. Yet the very act of speculation drives discovery and philosophical reflection. Could intuition, creativity, and problem-solving be influenced by latent ancestral knowledge? Could lost philosophies or technologies resonate faintly in our biology? These questions are not answered definitively, but their exploration invites awe, wonder, and contemplation. They are cinematic, philosophical, and intellectually engaging, exactly the terrain where science meets imagination. Finally, the story closes with a reflective cadence. DNA, consciousness, and human history are intertwined in a complex interplay of persistence and impermanence. We walk through ruins, both external and internal, contemplating the achievements, failures, and mysteries of our species. Within us may lie traces of survival, resilience, and perhaps echoes of civilizations that came before. The cinematic tension, the oscillation between awe and doubt, curiosity and caution leaves the audience suspended in wonder, imagining the untapped potential hidden in their very cells. As we draw our journey to a close, pause to imagine the vast tapestry of human existence. Each thread woven by countless generations, each moment a fleeting flicker against the backdrop of time. Civilization rises and falls, cities crumble into dust, and knowledge sometimes vanishes like mist at dawn. Yet life persists. Through the intimate dance of DNA, consciousness, and culture, something endures, a continuity that transcends individual lifetimes and fleeting achievements. The question we began with, could our DNA hold the memory of past civilizations, remains unanswered, but the exploration itself illuminates the extraordinary nature of existence. Science reminds us of what is measurable, observable, and verifiable. We know DNA carries information, a precise code dictating the structure and function of every living cell. Epigenetics shows that experiences, stress, trauma, adaptation, can leave molecular imprints, subtly influencing descendants. These findings anchor our wonder in reality, providing a foundation of credibility. Yet, the very same science reveals its limitations. No evidence confirms that complex knowledge, philosophies, or the art of vanished civilizations are stored within our genes. The measurable is extraordinary, yet it is the speculative that fires imagination and philosophical reflection. Speculation, however, is not mere fantasy. It is the lens through which humans have always expanded understanding. Across millennia, we have looked to the stars, to the deep oceans, and to the silent ruins of ancient cities, asking questions that cannot yet be answered. Could the intuition that sparks innovation, the sudden insight into a problem, or the subtle inclinations that shape behavior carry whispers of ancestral experience? Perhaps, perhaps not. The tension between doubt and possibility, between measurable fact and imaginative wonder, is what makes inquiry itself a human marvel. Cinematically, envision the contrast. The microscopic elegance of a double helix, twisting silently in every cell, juxtaposed against the grandeur of human achievement and the decay of civilizations. Pyramids, temples, and lost cities, once vibrant with life, now silent, serve as reminders of both human ingenuity and impermanence. Meanwhile, life itself continues, molecular continuity outlasting stone and story. In this juxtaposition lies the poetic essence of our inquiry: the ephemeral versus the enduring, the observable versus the imaginable, the fleeting lives of individuals against the persistent rhythm of life. Consciousness, ever the bridge, allows us to reflect, question, and dream. It is through consciousness that humans connect with history, interpret experience, and imagine possibilities. Even if DNA does not explicitly carry memories of past civilizations, the very act of pondering such a possibility reveals something profound. Humans are wired for curiosity, for awe, for the pursuit of meaning beyond survival. Our minds extend across time, bridging the chasm between what was, what is, and what might be. In this sense, legacy is not merely molecular. It is cognitive, cultural, and philosophical. We may never know the full extent of the echoes within us. Perhaps latent knowledge remains dormant, encoded in ways our current science cannot detect. Perhaps the traces of civilizations long vanished exist not in our genes, but in our collective imagination, intuition, and culture. Yet even uncertainty carries its own beauty. To wonder, to ask, to trace connections across generations and civilizations is to engage with the profound mystery of being human. In this sense, curiosity becomes a legacy in itself, passed from mind to mind, from one era to the next, shaping thought and inspiring discovery. Reflect for a moment on time. Civilization is transient, measured in centuries. DNA endures across millennia. Yet consciousness allows humans to compress, reinterpret, and imagine the vast stretches of history. The rise and fall of empires, the inventions that transform society, the triumphs and tragedies of countless lives, they converge in memory, myth, and imagination. Our stories, like our genes, form a continuity, one that preserves lessons, ideals, and reflections. Even without molecular archives of ancient knowledge, the human mind carries fragments of the past, amplified and transformed through culture, education, and shared experience. Philosophically, this convergence challenges conventional notions of identity. Are we simply the sum of our genetic inheritance, our personal experiences, and the environment we navigate? Or are we also vessels for the cumulative echoes of humanity, its aspirations, mistakes, discoveries, and wisdom? Speculation invites the mind to expand, suggesting that identity may be both individual and collective, temporal and enduring, molecular and imaginative. Each human life becomes a nexus, where past and future, biology and culture, science and philosophy, meet in a delicate interplay of continuity and transformation. Consider again the cinematic imagery. DNA spiraling within the nucleus of a cell, the silent rhythm of replication and repair. Juxtapose this with the panorama of civilization, the rise of cities, the building of monuments, the fleeting brushstrokes of art and literature that survive and fade. The past is simultaneously tangible and intangible, encoded in matter, remembered in consciousness, and preserved in imagination. This duality, the measurable and the mysterious, forms the narrative spine of human curiosity, inviting awe at both the grandeur of existence and the intimate intricacies of life itself. Our inquiry also touches upon ethics and responsibility. If ancestral experiences influence behavior, if echoes of history shape identity, then how might we act in ways that honor continuity, wisdom, and survival? While the speculative notion of DNA as a memory of civilizations is unproven, reflecting on its implications encourages mindfulness, stewardship, and care for future generations. Legacy is not only about inheritance, but about conscious creation, what we choose to encode in culture, environment, and education for those who follow. In this way, contemplation becomes actionable, bridging philosophy with lived experience. In this final reflection, awe is balanced with humility. Humanity is small in time and space, yet capable of immense curiosity, creativity, and understanding. We are simultaneously fragile and resilient, fleeting yet enduring, ephemeral yet capable of imagining eternity. DNA, consciousness, and culture together form a continuum, a web in which identity, knowledge, and legacy intersect. While the memory of lost civilizations in our genes remains speculative, the very pursuit of such questions illuminates the wonder inherent in being human, the capacity to dream, question, and seek connections across time and existence. The cinematic crescendo reaches its poetic peak. Imagine the cosmos, vast and indifferent, stars igniting and fading, galaxies spiraling in silence. Amid this grandeur, life persists on a pale blue dot, intricate and fragile, encoded in molecules that replicate tirelessly. Consciousness emerges, reflecting upon itself, contemplating the ruins of civilizations, the rise of cities, and the fleeting brilliance of human endeavor. In this space, science and speculation intertwine, leaving the audience suspended in awe, curiosity, and contemplation, a meditation on existence, inheritance, and the echoes that may reside within. Asterisk. Finally, let us return to the question that framed our journey. Could DNA hold the memory of past civilizations? The answer is elusive. The scientific evidence is compelling yet limited. Epigenetic memory, inherited behaviors, and molecular adaptation are real, measurable phenomena. But the encoding of complex cultural knowledge remains unproven. And yet, in the tension between what is known and what is imagined, the human mind finds its most profound engagement. To ponder, to dream, to ask such questions is itself a testament to the wonder and mystery of life. As we close, consider the poetic resonance. Each of us carries within us the legacy of survival, adaptation, and experience. Our genes are vessels of biological memory. Our minds, vessels of imagination. Together, they weave the continuity of human existence. Ruins crumble, texts fade, and civilizations pass, yet life and consciousness endure. The echoes of history, whether molecular or imagined, ripple through generations, shaping identity, culture, and understanding. In this way, the legacy within us is both tangible and metaphorical, a bridge across time, connecting past, present, and future in the intimate and awe-inspiring architecture of existence. In the end, the journey matters as much as the destination. Whether or not our DNA literally holds the memory of civilizations, the pursuit of understanding illuminates the marvel of being human. Science provides grounding, speculation ignites wonder, and consciousness interprets the interplay of both. We are, in essence, living archives, carrying forward the cumulative story of life, consciousness, and culture. And as we ponder our own place in this continuum, we glimpse the profound beauty of existence, fragile, fleeting, yet endlessly rich with possibility. So look within, consider the double helix spinning silently in every cell, and reflect upon the echoes it may carry, not only of survival, but perhaps, in ways we cannot yet measure, of human experience itself. The question remains open, the mystery intact, and the awe everlasting. In this space between certainty and imagination, science and philosophy, the legacy within us continues silent, profound, and eternally inspiring.